Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another week at Beyond the Trailer Park. And I guess a Happy New Year is in order because it is now 2018. Let's hope it's a damn sight better than 2017. That's all I can say about that. I hope everybody had a nice holiday and did whatever it is that they enjoy doing on the holidays. I had a nice time playing Cards Against Humanity with a bunch of heathens, so there's always that. So tonight this is a little weird. I guess I'm my own guest. So we're also a little light. Morgan and Tracy are still recuperating from holiday festivities, so they won't be joining us tonight. But Beth is here all the way from Pennsylvania. Good evening.
Howdy, howdy, and Happy New Year, and
Thank you.
all that fun shit.
Well,
but yes, we are now into 2018. We are 11 months from Election Day.
Oh boy.
Midterm election, folks. Start vetting your candidates now. Don't you just love me for bringing politics in on day one?
Well, somebody's got to do it.
Yeah. It's gonna be an interesting year. Definitely.
Okay. That's okay.
But I think we should explain a little bit why you're your own guest today.
Yeah, that'd probably be a good idea. And it wasn't, not that I'm adverse to it. It wasn't my idea. I never kind of thought that I should be my own guest, but somebody thought that was the way to go. So yeah.
Well, what it is for those of you that are not aware, Miss Deb here has launched another project called Full Quranic.
Yep.
And for those that aren't familiar yet with the show, it's a podcast, it's not a live show, where she reads through the Quran, however you want to pronounce it. So we don't have to, unless you're a dork like me who gets off on shit like that and reads along with her. But basically,
that is my tagline. I'm reading the Quran, so you don't have to.
So you don't have to, yes. And I think, as I said to her before this show, I think one of the things that needs to be, well, there's 2 points that need to be stressed. And it's something that we brought up in another interview she did the other day with Maddie Love. And that is, this is her view. This is her reading the Quran and her reactions to what's written. And we'll get into it a bit later as to, what choice she made for the translation, yada, yada, yada. But Deb is Canadian. She is a Western atheist woman.
Yep.
Reading the Quran. It's not necessarily to bash on Islam or what's written in the Quran. It's her reaction to it. It'd be like us reading the Book of Mormon or Dianetics, or it's our initial gut reaction. I know for myself,
maybe that's
just like reading.
When I finish the Quran, is I'll read Dianetics. I've not read that one yet.
Oh God, dude, save yourself. Although it's been a good 20 years that I've read it, but it's your reaction, and I think that's an important point to keep in mind. And it's not, while it does in some regard, disparage the ideas put forth, that's not the primary purpose.
No.
And I think, like, one of your inspirations for the show was one very similar that's no longer in service.
Yes.
And I think it's good, because I'm the type of person, especially since I had my strokes, where for a while reading was very difficult because my eyes were so foobarred. And I couldn't physically read, so I started getting into audiobooks. And I listen to a lot of podcasts, and I watch video a lot. I listen more than anything to videos and stuff to learn and to understand things and yada yada yada. And I think having someone read it to you, sometimes you pick out things that you wouldn't when you're reading it.
Oh,
And as an introduction to the Quran, I think something like this would go a long way.
well, and one of the reasons why I decided to do this is the aforementioned show that's no longer with us. I was a fan of that show precisely because I looked at a few verses of the Quran with the intention of reading it and went, I can't read this shit. And so having a show where someone else was reading it to me was what I needed, because I wanted the information. I wanted to know what was in there, but reading it on my own was just so horribly dull.
Well,
I
think
just,
think of it of reading for comparison. Think of it as reading the book of Leviticus.
yeah.
All the
Well, and
or Genesis, all the begats. It's like there's parts of the Quran that are not conducive.
well, and the worst thing is, so excuse me, it was originally written, of course, in Arabic. And then eventually, once Muslims started to evangelize in English speaking areas, somebody decided, maybe we should have an English version. And so I chose a particular English translation. It was done by a guy who, and I'm pretty sure he added this name, but Mohammed Marmaduke Pickthall, who was an Englishman who and obviously converted to Islam. And he wrote this translation in the 1920s, which you would never know if you opened it up and started reading, because he wrote it like it was written in the 15 damn 20s. It's all in Elizabethan English, and it sounds just like the King James Bible, which I think is why he chose it to do it that way, because there's a lot of sort of feeling that a real religious text should sound like that for some reason. I don't get it, because up until King James, which is 1611 is the King James Bible, people didn't talk that way. I mean, actually,
Well,
worse, they spoke in Old and Middle English, which is even worse. But you know what I'm saying.
well, a lot of times too, with going to the whole King James, the language that is presented, that's basically to overly simplify it is Shakespearean English. That's not what was spoken back then.
Oh hell no!
And
I mean, come on. When would you ever listen to someone who you knew spoke Arabic saying thee, thou, and constraineth and shit like that? They would never say that. Arabic doesn't even flow that way that you would translate it into English to sound that way.
Well, that kind of brings up another question is, you chose your translation for a specific reason, which I want you to kind of expound on that. But for anybody else that wanted to choose a English version, one, it's not, if you get into hardcore discussions with those of the Islamic faith, they believe that there's nothing good. I mean, you have to read it in the Arabic. But I do know some ex-Muslims that say, hey, this version's pretty good compared to this version. So how would somebody who wanted to follow along with you, like you sent me a copy of the Quran because mine disappeared.
Yep.
So, I've kind of leafed through it. My reading has been really bad
And
lately.
you know what's funny
So
is when I sent you that, I wasn't even aware of different translations, so I don't even know what translation that is that I sent you.
you sent me translated by Malana Wahiduddin Khan,
Jeez.
Farida Kamen. It's called from Good Word Books.
I've never even heard of that translation. That's funny.
Yeah, this was
So it almost sounds like it might be.
according.
Sorry?
It was first published in 2009, reprinted in 2014.
Okay, so it may be a more recent translation.
Yeah.
As I say, the Pickthall one was done in the 1920s, and I chose that because that particular translation has the least amount of complaints as far as from Muslims from it being a translation, and the amount of criticisms. And Pickthall had a reasonably good reputation as a convert. There weren't many complaints about him or questions about his motivation for doing a translation. So I went with that. There is another one though. If listening to Shakespearean English drives you really, really nuts, there's another one translated by a guy, Abdullah Yusuf Ali. He was an Anglo-Indian convert who translated it. And it is later than the Pickthall one. So probably like 10 or 15 years after Pickthall. And it's much more in plain English. I do have a copy of that, but as I say, I wanted to use the Pickthall one because it had a slightly better reputation than the Abdullah Ali translation. But and I even had a copy that appeared. I found it in, I think, Value Village, but it came from the Islamic Information Center at the University of Waterloo.
Well, I think that's a good point because one thing that you've brought up in various conversations regarding your debates on Facebook in general is that most individuals of the Islamic faith may be able to read the Quran, but they do not speak Arabic. They rotely
Yes.
memorize what's written. So, to me, the argument that you must know the Quran in Arabic falls flat just on that face. Now,
Absolutely.
of course, you're going to get those that are experts that do speak Arabic and do understand the language at its root. Just like with scholars in Christianity that do speak Hebrew and do speak the Greek, although caveat, the Greek and Hebrew that's written in the Bible is not the same as the Greek and Hebrew that is spoken today. So, I mean, yeah, there are going to be those few, but that whole argument, and that's why I think these translations are important. When people use that argument that, oh well, you've never read it in the Arabic, well, you have it fucking memorized.
Yeah.
You
Well,
don't
like,
know it either.
remember when I talked to Riyasat, who was the Bangladeshi ex-Muslim who now lives in Canada. He talked to me about that, and he's like, yeah, in Bangladeshi they speak Bengali, A lot of folks there speak Bengali. And he says, I don't know Arabic. He says, but I could recite you, lots of the Quran in Arabic. I could tell you, like he said, I could tell you Arabic number letters, things like that. I could tell, like, if I heard an Arabic word, I could tell you it was an Arabic word. But he says, I don't speak Arabic. I can't read Arabic. And I had no fucking clue what words I was reciting. Now, I would imagine that at least for some passages, an imam would tell you what supposedly that meant because you're supposed to know some parts of it, and you have Quran study and things like that. But nobody, like, if they say, oh, I memorized the entire Quran in Arabic, there's no way in hell they know what's in the entire Quran. Just no.
Well, that's the thing. You could hand them a Quran that's written in Arabic. They wouldn't be able to read it. It's just like handing a Bible to a Christian that's written in Greek, Aramaic, and Hebrew. They would not be able to read it.
Now, they could look at the Arabic. They could look at the Arabic and verbalize what is written there, but they would not be able to tell you in their own language what they just read.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just I find that argument that you have to read it in the Arabic just asinine for the simple reason most of them can't read it anyway.
And this
rote memorization.
This is my key point for anybody who criticizes, well, you are a Muslim, so you're not reading it properly, and you don't have the right way of looking at it, and you're just going to interpret it wrong. Bullshit. And I've probably mentioned this on the show before, but I firmly believe that if you think your God is omnipotent and omniscient, there should be no translations, no interpretation, no commentaries or question. I should be able to open this dang book and be able to understand exactly what's being written there, no matter what language it is. And if I can't do that, if you're telling me that that's not possible, that I have to have the guidance of some scholar or some commentary or whatever, then your God is not omnipotent and omniscient, therefore not a God, and I don't have to pay attention to it.
Well, it's like a point I made the other day on my Facebook, and it was after discussions in a part of, and one of the trends that I've noticed is that, what theists, primarily of the Christian variety, but this is prevalent in Islam too, is that there's over 30,000 different sects of Christianity worldwide. Yep. There's 3,000, give or take, practiced in the U.S. alone. So stating that I have no understanding of the teachings of Christ, which they don't follow, but that's a whole name, is stupid. Which, like you said, which version? Which denomination am I supposed to follow? And I said to the guy that I was in discussions was, how do you define what some people claim is a personal relationship?
Oh, that's
what are your standards? And then he goes on to elucidate his particular denomination. Well, this is what my church. Well, I don't fucking care what your church believes. I want to know what the Bible says. And it's like you said. I mean, I know when I was in college, and I had to take a class on missionary history or some such shit. It's been so long I don't remember now. And one of the main premises of missionary work, at least presented by my school, was that the Bible's so easy a 5-year-old could understand it, and that translates over.
No one
Exactly.
ever be able to tell you that your interpretation is wrong.
Right. And it translates back and forth between Islam. I mean, Judaism has quite a few sects. Islam, as we know, has, different sects. But the thing is, like, I brought up the concept of the Trinity. I brought up the idea of eternal security, which is basically once saved, always saved. And I also brought up the idea of free will. Well, within the different denominations and different sects of Christianity, those aren't universal.
Oh.
The Trinity didn't even come around till the 4th century. As a doctrine, it was not solidified until around the 4th century. Yeah, there were sprinklings of, talks about it before that, but as a doctrine of the church, it did not exist prior to, I want to say Origen or Tertullian, I can't remember which. But I said there's sects today that do not accept the Trinity.
Mm-hmm.
I said, and he goes, and again he goes, right, but well, my church, I don't give a shit what your church believes. Just to say, it's like you said, if you can't open the book and gain what God wants you to gain, then it's worthless.
Yep, exactly. And the other interesting thing is a lot of Muslims will tell you that, well, because we've talked before about how the Bible was sort of cobbled together and it had centuries of oral tradition before it was ever written down anywhere, and we don't know who wrote it or who it's written by estimated 30 or 40 different people and yada yada yada. And they all say, well, the Quran has never been corrupted that way. And they say that's because, it came directly. I love this. It came directly from God to Gabriel to Muhammad to his companions to everyone else. So there's no way, like, we know it was written by God via Gabriel and yada yada yada. Well, geez, sorry, but yes, it is corrupted, and there's a lot of ways that it was. And I've actually, my second episode of the show, I delve into why the Quran is as it is. And now the culture in that part of Arabia at the time was a long-standing culture of oral tradition. It was a common practice to memorize large pieces of poetry and recite it back to each other, and they were well practiced at it. But we all know how shitty the human mind is at remembering details. We're terrible at it. We are absolutely terrible at it. And because we have a natural propensity to assign patterns to things that don't actually have patterns, our memories are very untrustworthy. So there's that. And people say, well, they put the Quran together almost right away after Muhammad died. Well, that's not entirely true. It was several years after Muhammad died, and they had a network of people who Muhammad had 43 companions to whom he taught his revelations to. And they then were considered to have been specially trained by Muhammad to disseminate the contents of the Quran to other people. And a few years after Muhammad died, well, actually, I think it was maybe only a year or two after he died, there was already sectarian violence because the secession from Muhammad was very unclear. There was Abu Bakr took over, who was Muhammad's best bud, and there was some other guy whose name escapes me, not the other Ali, but another guy yet again who was trying to vie for leadership. And anyway, the long story short is there was a big battle between the people of that guy and Abu Bakr's people, and some 700 people who had memorized the Quran were killed. And so they kind of went, ooh, damn, if that keeps happening, we're going to run out of people that have properly memorized the Quran. It was like they were certified as the right version of the Quran, whatever. So they decided that they needed to put it down, like write the stuff down. Well, some of the companions of Muhammad over the years had been writing bits and pieces down here and there, but nobody said, maybe it's a good idea if I write this all down, because the culture was one of memorization and recitation. So they didn't think to write the whole thing down. Why they would write down one or two chapters here and there, I don't know, but that's what they did. But one guy got tasked with going through all of the companions and finding all of the little bits and pieces of, I mean, they were writing it down on bits of bone, on rocks, on leaves, which famously later on becomes important because Muhammad's favorite wife, Aisha, had written down some key verses on a leaf and kept it either under her pillow or under her bed. They're not really sure. But when she became distracted with the death of Muhammad, wasn't paying attention to where she was keeping her leaf, and a pet goat got in and ate it. So,
well, and that brings me kind of to a question I have, and I don't know if you'll be able to answer it or not. I would say it's a bit of folklore per se, or misinformation, or just me being a stupid idiot, because I know enough about Islam to get myself in trouble.
yeah.
And one of the things that I've been told is that the Quran actually did go through editing.
Yes.
Not so much what you explained, but initially there were a couple different versions. Yep. And then there was the sectarian violence, and they got rid of all the other versions and kept just this one.
Yes, that didn't happen till almost 20 years after Muhammad's death. But
okay,
what happened is, so they started to sort of put it together and this would have been in Medina, most likely, because that's where his center really was. The sources I read didn't really specify whether Abu Bakr started this process in Mecca or Medina. And for all I know, there were companions in Mecca and Medina and places in between. I don't know. This poor bastard had to run around, find them all, collect whatever bits and pieces they had. But the other thing is that, so not only just because he found it written down did not mean it went in the Quran. He also had to find two companions at minimum who could remember it the same way it was written down. So,
well, I know in one of your interviews you had mentioned that they actually had to go to Muhammad to get verification of what he meant.
I was going to get to that. That. But before we get to that, so while they were running around trying to put the bits and pieces of the Quran together, over the time that Muhammad was alive and worked to spread the faith, it had spread well outside of Mecca and Medina into other parts of the Middle East. And what was happening was, as soon as you, like, let's say there was an enclave of Muslims, I don't know, in ancient times, let's say 200 miles away. That would be a fairly long distance if all you have to ride is a camel. So those people, there's no way to communicate in between on a regular basis. So what was happening was there emerged versions in different places that were slightly different than where it was in another place. So even though they were working to put it together into one document, the third ruler who came by after Abu Bakr died, after the second guy died, the third guy, whose name was Uthman, he went and said, damn, those people over there are saying that this is different, and those people in that city say that that's different. We can't have that shit. We've got to canonize this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So it was the third caliph after Muhammad that said, hey, we've got to have a standard version of the Quran. So already within the first 20 years of Muhammad's death, there were differences in the Quran cropping up in different lands. But the one that you were talking about, now I have to backtrack a little bit for folks who maybe aren't familiar with how Islam works. The Quran is not the only document or holy scripture. It's supposed to be the main one, but it's kind of like how in Mormonism the Bible's supposed to be the main and the Book of Mormon's supposed to be secondary, but really they pay more attention to the Book of Mormon. There's another set of documents called the Hadith. And what those are writings by people who lived with or knew Muhammad, or people who talked to a friend of a friend of a friend of Muhammad. You know how that works. But they're stories about Muhammad that are supposed to help you understand how to interpret the Quran. So if you read a verse and you're like, well, I think it might mean this, but I'm not really sure, you would go to the Hadith and look for a story where Muhammad either talks about that verse or his actions reflect the same scenario that's in that verse. So, I've never read the Hadith in any huge block. I've read bits and pieces that pertain to something I'm researching. But let's say we read a verse about how to properly yell at your disobedient fig tree. For just this didn't happen as far as I know outside of Jesus, but whatever. Let's say there was a verse about how to properly yell at your disobedient fig tree, and you weren't really sure if you understood the directions properly. You would go to the Hadith and you would look to see if there was a story about a time when Muhammad yelled at a disobedient fig tree, and make sure that you mirror your interpretation to whatever it was that Muhammad did. That's what the Hadith do. Mm-hmm. So this is yeah. Can I say something?
The Hadith sound like a corollary to what we consider commentaries.
Yes, but they also have commentaries separate from the Hadiths.
Yeah. They sound like more like contemporary, like people that knew Muhammad, whereas most of our Christian commentaries are written by, quote, scholars that are far removed. Although, I mean, when you go back into Tertullian and Origen,
Islam has commentaries written by far removed scholars. That's called the tafsir. So that's a whole other ball wax.
Yeah.
So
ball wax.
In the Hadith, there is a story about versions of the Quran. And so now the Hadith are also ranked by their trustworthiness, for lack of a better description. And so what are the ones that are considered to be absolutely true are the Sahih Hadiths. And then there are ones that they rank them like, yeah, they're most likely true, and then probably true, and maybe not so true, and etc. So this comes from a Sahih Hadith that's Bukhari, and that's one. So this is one of the highest ranked hadiths from Bukhari. And this is book 44, Hadith 9. And I'll read you the story because it's only a paragraph. And it's narrated by a dude named Umar bin al-Khattab. And he says, I heard Hisham bin Hakim bin Hazim reciting the Surat al-Furqan in a way different to that of mine. Allah's messenger had taught it to me in a different way. So I was about to quarrel with him during the prayer, but I waited till he was finished. Then I tied his garment around his neck and seized him by it and brought him to Allah's messenger and said, I have heard him reciting Surat al-Furqan in a way different to the way you taught it to me. The Prophet ordered me to release him and asked Hisham to recite it. When he recited it, Allah's apostle said, it was revealed in this way. He then asked me to recite it, and when I recited it, he said, it was revealed in this way. The Quran has been revealed in 7 different ways. So recite it in the way that is easier for you. So
in other words, recite it how it makes sense to you. Basically, what we see with some of our televangelists today and Christian leaders, i.e., Paula White, who, the Bible sounds awfully like what she wants.
Well, now the interesting thing, because I just last night was debating with a Muslim fellow who claimed that the Quran was incorruptible. And I was like, Muhammad said that there's 7 different versions of the Quran, right? And he was like, prove it. So I brought him my nice screenshot of the Hadith, and his reply was, oh, well, that was meant to mean 7 different dialects. So it doesn't change the meaning. It's just different dialects. That's all that means. Oh, we still use those dialects today in Arabia. I'm like, yeah, bullshit. But
see, and this is kind of a sidetrack, but it's just like the same type of BS we get in Christian apologetics. We see in, for us, we deal with Islam. In Islamic apologetics, it's like, can't you guys come up with something new?
There is
I mean, that's always been one of my biggest gripes. There's nothing ever new in apologetics.
Nope, not even in different religions. It's all the same kind of bullshit. So yeah, but that's the Prophet himself right there saying that he revealed the Quran in 7 different ways. So, and I've only ever seen one, like, I don't know how different these different ways would be, but I don't know. It's it definitely goes against the idea that the Quran was perfect from the minute it came out of the cave.
Well, and that goes to a point that you and I like to make concerning Thomas Paine and Revelation.
Oh, yes. Revelation is nothing but hearsay to everybody else but the guy getting the revelation.
Yeah. I mean, and that's why, like, there's this new-ish so-called prophet. He's a retired firefighter who's got a hard-on for Rump and the GOTP, and he comes out with all these supposed revelation. It's like, okay, that might be new to you, but has nothing to do with me. I mean, he's real nut job. I just find it funny, odd that nothing new. It's the same BS, whether it's Christianity,
the same,
or whether it's Islam. Now, Judaism is a little bit different because they really don't proselytize.
Yes,
but I think we'll find with any of the Abrahamic faiths specifically, we're going to run into the same problems. Now, I can't speak to Hindu, I can't speak to Buddhism because I'm not that familiar. I mean, I'm familiar, but I'm not familiar enough to make that.
The volume of Buddhist sayings is ridiculous. It's like 3,000 or something like that.
Yeah, it's quite vast.
Yeah. Which
So second,
I don't even know how
ahead.
you find value in all of that.
Yeah. Well, the second point I wanted to stress, besides the fact that this is all coming from your perspective, and one of the things we should note too is that you do cite your references in your show notes, so if somebody wants to go look for themselves, they can.
Absolutely.
I mean, this is not shit we're pulling from our asses. And although I might be a little bit more neurotic than Deb is in the case of citing, works that we read, she does go and post, what she feels is pertinent to the opinion she's formed.
Yes.
And that'll bring us to another point later, but
it's only the first 2 episodes where I do any extensive research, because the rest of what I'm doing is just reading the damn Quran.
I think the background's important, but you give enough, but you don't go over the top. I mean, we could spend hours just talking about Muhammad and his life.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
And I think a lot of people, I mean, I kind of have insider information, obviously, but I think a lot of people don't realize, like, one point you bring up is there's a question about whether Muhammad was really illiterate or not.
Yep.
And you delve into that. I don't want to give too much of your show away.
Well, and find out in the last, I think it was the last show I did, it actually mentions him being illiterate in the Quran. So now I'm operating on the assumption that Muhammad is making this stuff up. Okay. I don't believe that he got a revelation from God through the angel Gabriel. I just don't. I'm assuming that he's making this stuff up. So he's saying in the Quran, hey, God says I'm illiterate. So that adds to it. But yeah, I talk about why I don't think he was illiterate.
Yeah. Well, and it goes to a point I jokingly had made one day to you in PM about the folklore surrounding the Oracle of Delphi, which is Greek mythology. And the Oracle was supposedly in a cave, and it's, again, this is kind of folklorish. I don't know how vetted it is, but one of the hypotheses is that these caves were volcanic in nature. In other words, vents from volcanoes, whether they're dormant or not. So the Oracle was inhaling this toxic fumes, and probably higher than a kite. Well, do we know for a fact whether Muhammad was basically tripping out on toxic gas, or did he chomp on some mushrooms before he went into this cave? We just don't know. Or was he having a psychotic break?
Yeah, we don't. Well, he actually himself told his first wife that he thought he was losing his marbles.
Yeah, I mean, so there's a lot of speculation, and you bring that out, and but still, as you said, you don't spend an inordinate amount of time on it, just the first 2 episodes, and then you get into the meat of the matter, which is the Quran.
Yes.
And I think, which brings us to a second point that I personally like to stress in regards to your show, and we've talked about it on Beyond the Trailer Park, is that you are not being Islamophobic. And
I don't.
And you're not promoting anti-Muslim bigotry. And there is, as you say, Islamophobia is bullshit. It doesn't exist. But and I think it's an important point. And whether you're reading the Quran, the Bible, the Bhagavad Gita, whatever, I think it's important that we remember that what's presented in the Bible, what's presented in the Bhagavad Gita or in the Quran is an ideology.
Yep. Yeah. The
Yeah.
Quran is not a person. Okay.
Yeah.
So and Muhammad is no longer a person if he was. And like for instance, there's a story just the other day of a atheist I was a blogger or something in
Yeah,
Bangladesh
in Bangladesh.
who's being arrested for disrespecting Islam and Muhammad. You can't disrespect a dead guy. I'm sorry. Like, fuck that. So, yeah, I will say things that some people probably don't like about Muhammad. And I say things about what's in the Quran that I'm sure there are going to be lots of people don't like that too. But that's what's in the damn book. And I'm going to give my perspective about what's in the damn book.
Yeah. And I think, and it goes for any religion. I mean, the Bible is a book of ideas. The Quran is a book of ideas.
And trust
It's
me, I
not.
have said some bad shit about what's in the Bible.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, I do on a daily basis. I get condemned to hell pretty much on a daily basis. If I don't, I'm obviously not doing something right.
Yeah.
But you know, and that's the thing. Like, I mean, you and I both are, you know, like the hajib, for example. While we will protect a person's right to wear the hajib, we think it's a really shitty idea.
Good job.
Nah. As I said, I know enough to get myself in trouble.
That's okay. Well, for instance, there was a fantastic meme going around today. I don't know if anybody has seen, but Iran there's a lot of uprisings going on in Iran right now and a backlash against the theocratic government. One of the laws in Iran since the revolution in, what was it, 1978 or something, is the law is that no woman may go out in public without wearing a hijab. And like it doesn't, like if I went to Iran, I would be expected to wear a fucking hijab, which is why I ain't going there. And there's a picture that came out the other day of a young of a young Iraqi woman. She's standing up on like some kind of cement pillar in a walkway, and she is not wearing a hijab, and she's waving some kind of white flag. And like that takes some balls because that's still illegal over there. But what I love is the meme that came out like yesterday or today, and it has a picture of Linda Saucer, who is that stupid twat who ran the women's march, parading around in a fucking hijab, which I'm sorry, that is not a feminist symbol. I don't care how you twist it. And she has also come out in favor of Sharia law, which is ridiculous. So the caption was, it was a picture of Linda Saucer and it said fake feminist. And then next to the wonderful young lady standing proudly in the middle of a street in Iran with no hijab on, it says real feminist. So
Yeah, I saw that.
That made me smile.
Just on a sidetrack to the uprisings in Iran, I took the plunge, and on my alternative Twitter account, I've decided to follow Donald Trump.
Oh no!
I have. Yeah, this is not my primary Twitter. I do actually have a second Twitter that I follow some of my more nutty characters. And I really didn't want to put him on my primary because I'm getting a little better at it. But the other day on the 29th, he puts many reports of peace by Iranian citizens. Now keep in mind what he's saying here. Fed up with the regime's corruption and its squandering of the nation's wealth to fund terrorism abroad. Iranian government should respect their people's rights, including right to express themselves.
Oh.
The world is watching. So I posted as a meme, the irony is strong in this one. For a man who wants individuals fired from their fucking jobs for being critical of his policies, actions, or words. Everything he said concerning Iran, he bitches and moans about in this country. I just was like, and this was at like 5:30 this morning. This popped up in my feed. I'm like,
Beth, it's only a bad.
Yeah.
If it's only bad if brown people do it. Didn't you know that?
Yeah. You had to mention that.
Yeah,
but so. Yeah, I had to laugh because I'm not into New Year's resolutions per se, but now that I'm feeling better, I kind of want. I've been tinkering with some ideas for my blog and for Twitter and yada yada, and one of them was to follow Trump, which probably is not a good thing for my health. But that was the first thing I saw this morning, and I was like, but I just had to mention that.
Oh, geez.
But something you had mentioned in passing, and it's a point that I think we should bring out, is that, okay, you currently have 6 episodes done.
Yes.
And can you explain what you cover?
Yeah.
You kind of touched on the background of Mo, but explain why you think that background's important. And then one point is the historicity of Muhammad versus the historicity of Nail Boy.
Yeah, Nail Boy. I like that. Yeah, well, as I say, I'm of the mind that Muhammad made all this shit up. So I thought it's important to kind of understand a bit about the guy, so we can see where some of it's coming from. And it really actually does help, because when you're reading about where stuff in the Quran, there are things that are pertinent to his life when you get into it. So the other point is, I'm not just opening the Quran and reading it as it is. And this is a really important point to kind of understand the flow of the show, and also why the idea that the Quran has never been changed is utter crap. Because the Quran was not, quote, revealed in the order in which you would find it today. If you were just to go get either a Yusuf Ali translation or a Muhammad Pickthall translation, the verses are not in the order in which Muhammad came out with them. They've been organized roughly longest verse, shortest verse. So why that is, the information's been really cloudy on that. It had a lot to do with the canonization process that happened with Uthman. I don't know exactly why he did that. The Abu Bakr and Uthman schools are, of course, Sunni. The Shias believe that, at least some of them believe, that the order was changed in order to hide the fact that their guy Ali was supposed to be the next caliph and not Abu Bakr, but that's a whole other thing. So the order of the verses or the chapters really skips around, and some of the chapters are extremely small, like for instance, chapter 108 only has 3 verses. It's super small. So, and the Quran isn't that long. It only has 114 chapters. They call them surahs. But so I have gone in my first episode. I did, it was like something like 20 chapters ish. I don't want to count them right here. That's kind of boring. The second episode was more like 12 or so chapters, because a lot of them again are quite small. And then in the third episode, we get now only two and a quarter chapters, because now one of them had 55 verses, one had 88. And I'm on Surah or chapter 7 right now, which actually has 206 verses. So it's quite a bit longer. And because I prefer the show to only go about half an hour, I started Surah 7 in the third episode, and the fourth episode is nothing but Surah 7. And then the fifth episode, and then the sixth episode, I'm still reading Surah 7, and I will still be reading Surah 7 when I come back and do the next one. So it's taking a long time. But that's kind of where I'm going with it. Right now, it's all been a lot of I am Allah, you better follow me, or here's all the horrible, nasty things that are going to happen to you if you don't follow me. And here's a bunch of examples, and there's a lot of biblical examples. So it's like, here's a bunch of people from the Bible, like Noah and Moses and Elisha and Jesus, and like, here's all these people, nobody listened to them, and look at all the bad things that happened to them. And then he also throws in a few tribes and things that I guess are of an Arabic nature, because I'm not familiar with them. There's like the tribe of Ad and the tribe of Thamud, and telling about, well, they didn't listen to me either, and look at all the bad things that happened to them. Like, that's all it is so far. The only one thing that I could find that was a directive was to pay the poor tax. That's it. Everything else is.
Two questions. One, in relation to the Bible, where does it stand in relation to the Quran within Islam? And the second question kind of goes to what you were talking about, the different tribes. And I think I have asked this of Faisal and of Ali. Have you come across one of the things, what little I know of Islam and the discussions I get into, and this is going back a few years, is that intertribal warfare, between specifically the Shias and the
the Shias and Sunnis aren't tribes; they're different sects of Islam.
Well, there's the different sects. Actually,
what you're thinking of is the Quraysh were the ruling tribe of Mecca, and they had a very acrimonious relationship with the Muslims.
Well, this actually goes back to Jacob and Ishmael in the Bible.
Oh, yes, it does.
Supposedly, allegedly, and again, this is not a point I've ever vetted, and because it probably threw me off that I didn't even know where to look, was that one discussion I had gotten into was like, well, you don't understand the history because Ishmael was, because of Hagar, and that's Ishmael is the father of Islam, and Jacob is, considered a patriarch of Christianity. Is there any truth to that? Does this fall into?
I don't know. I haven't encountered any of that yet. And see, so far, there's no cohesive story in the Quran. Like the Bible, yet, in the beginning there was Adam and Eve and blah blah blah. He mentioned Adam and Eve, but as an example of people who didn't listen to what I told them to do, and bad things happened to them. Although what was really cool, and the one bonus that I've come across so far, is Eve does not get blamed for that shit. It says it basically says that both of them didn't listen, and both of them. So there's no the serpent tempted the woman, blah blah blah. It's like, no, bad shit happened to both of them. So that was cool. But I mean, they bring up Lot, they bring up Job, he trots out this who's who of the Old Testament to say, look at all these people that didn't listen to me and bad things happened to them. But there's been no actual story of anything yet. Like, I don't know yet what the Islamic creation story is because it hasn't come up yet.
You just took the words out of my mouth.
Yeah,
I was gonna say, is there a creation story or not?
Apparently there is, but I'm not there yet. So literally all I have is I am Allah, I am your creator, I've done good shit for you, you better follow me, or look at these numerous examples of things that happened to people who didn't follow me. That's literally all I have in 4 episodes of reading so far.
And really, if you think of it from a apologetics or a counter apologetics view, it's basically, if you don't listen to me, fuck you. It's all threats.
That's all it is. And what I laugh about now, if anybody is familiar with David Michael and his reading of the Book of Mormon, one of his things was that he never ever read ahead in the Book of Mormon, so he literally had no idea what was coming next. I am not unfamiliar with parts of the Quran. There are a couple pieces of the Quran that I've actually researched in depth and have debated extensively. So there are parts that I do know about that I haven't come to yet in this reading. So one of them, there's a famous verse that gets thrown at you all the time. It's Quran 2:256. So I'm not even sure how long it's going to be before I get to chapter 2. It's quite a ways down the list. So that's going to be a while. Oh, it's like 2.25 pages of chapters in. So that's going to be a while. But that verse basically says there is no compulsion in religion. And Muslims love to trot this out all the time to say that you aren't being forced to be a Muslim, which is utter bullshit. Because my first question is, what's the penalty for not believing in Allah? And of course, it's you will burn in hell forever. Well, I don't know about you, but that sounds like a compulsion to me. and now yeah, 2 hours worth of reading and threats galore. That's a hell of a lot of compulsion.
Yeah, that was one of my early discussions I got into someone with, was about the whole notion of compulsion. I'll have to reread it again.
Well, but too, a lot of going back to religious followers not understanding their own religion. I brought that verse up to many a Muslim, and a good portion of them will react with, I didn't say you had to be a Muslim. I'm like, that's not what it means. It's not you specifically trying to force anyone to be a Muslim. It's your God forcing people to be a Muslim. Big difference.
Mm-hmm.
And Allah also, in the part that I have read, specifically says that I will only guide the people I like to the right path.
Yeah. Well, it's like that meme floating around where Jesus is knocking at a door saying, "Let me in," and the guy behind the door is like, "Why?" Or Grail, I don't know. Yeah. And Jesus like, because of what I'm going to do to you if you don't let me in.
Yeah.
Compulsion, I don't know what it is. It's like,
it is. That's
exactly what it is. You know, again, goes back. I mean, you have, you know, we have compulsion in Christianity, and a point that we've stressed in the past is, you know, the whole notion of what I call hereditary religion, based on where you live. where Richard Dawkins speaks to it, especially in God Delusion. You know, you are a Christian because that's what your fucking parents are, and that's what this country espouses. You know, you are Muslim because you live in Saudi Arabia or the Middle East because, well, that's, I mean, a good example. Look at what's going on in Egypt with the Coptic Christians. The persecution they receive there because they're not the right kind of Christian.
Yeah.
They're not Muslim, or they're not Muslim, or they're not Israeli, or not Israel, Judaic. So yeah, there's compulsion in religion.
Oh, absolutely. But that's this whole Muslim thing, is they try to say, well, our God specifically says we can't force anyone to be Muslim, and that's total bullshit. He spends chapter after chapter after chapter threatening non-believers with all kinds of nasty things.
Yeah. Well, that's why I think, ignoring the fact there are parts of the Quran that you know of beforehand because of discussions you've been in, you are approaching it in a very similar manner that David did with the Book of Mormon. Is you're reading it and you're giving your commentary, so to speak, right then and there.
Yes.
And I've actually started rereading the Bible. God knows, I don't know how many times I've done this. I think this is the 5th time I'm going to read from cover to cover. And it's just like, I can't even get out of chapter 1. It's like, because, it's hard. It's hard because I do have, vast amounts of previous knowledge, so it makes it hard that way, but I'm trying to approach it, as I said, one of the basic tenets of missionary work is that a 5-year-old can understand it. And so I'm trying to approach it from that aspect, although it's really difficult because I know I have biases, so I'm trying to ignore them as best I can. But you're doing that with the Quran, so I think that's important, and I think more people should do it. I think as atheists, or non-believers or agnostics, or read these books, read the Bhagavad Gita, read on Shinto, on Taoism, on all the different religions, and that's why I'm not adverse to religion being taught in school as a like a comparative religion class, but I am adverse to it being proselytizing class. I think if more kids are exposed to this bullshit, they're going to recognize it as bullshit.
Absolutely.
I mean,
I found the Quran 256, and so I figured I'll just read it quick because, hey, context. They always tell us context matters. So it says,
go for it.
There is no compulsion in religion. The right direction is henceforth distinct from error, and he who rejecteth false deities and believeth in Allah hath grasped a firm handhold which will never break. Allah is hearer and knower. So,
well, what's funny, I'm reading along in the version that you gave me, and I find this interesting. Basically, it says the same thing. It's missing a few words, like there shall be no compulsion in religion. True guidance has become distinct from error. Blah 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 blah. God.
mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, what more? I mean, you hear a lot of Christians. Well, I don't believe in Allah.
Yeah.
So it's funny that
Christians. The word Allah is Arabic for God.
But yeah, using the word God in a Quran is basically sacrilege. So here I have an American. Well, that's as I said, that's what I've heard. When you use those that I know. What is my computer doing? lean towards the word, word Allah over the word God, but in essence, all is, like you said, all it is Arabic for the word God.
Yeah, that's all it is. Oh, and
Yeah.
interesting, a couple little tidbits too. The word Islam means to submit or surrender. And the word Quran means recitation. So that's exactly what it was originally, was the recitation.
Right. And yeah, and that goes back to our point about being that a lot of your uh, non-native cannot speak Arabic. It's just all recitation.
Uh-huh.
It's basically memorizing a bunch of rote,
Yes.
sayings. It'd be like memorizing, the sayings of Confucius or the sayings
Well,
within Buddhism, and
and
not really understanding them.
And every time, at least in the Pickthall version, you start a new chapter, you start with, and it's useful for me because I'm skipping all over the place. It's easy to pinpoint when you're listening that I've started a new chapter because it starts off with, in the name of Allah, the beneficent, the merciful. Every fucking chapter starts that way.
Yeah. Well, a point you just made about you're kind of skipping around. Now, how come you're not reading it from, say, ouch, Surah 1 to Surah whatever? I don't know how many are in there.
Because
But why?
I wanted to read it in the order that Muhammad came up with it. Which,
Okay, so you're actually reading it in the way it was initially written.
yes, what it's called, the chronological order, as opposed
Okay.
to the traditional order. So yeah,
Okay. Yeah, I
I
don't know if you had stated that and I missed it, or
I did, but that's okay. So for
okay.
um verse 1 in the chronological order, the way I read it, is actually verse 96 in the traditional order. So a lot of the early revealed verses are near the back of the Quran, but I've read a lot of the higher verses in the hundreds, and now I'm on Surah 7.
Okay.
So it's does skip around. As I say, I haven't come up with a definitive answer as to why it is that way. But in the Yusuf Ali translation, it starts off every verse with, in the or chapter, sorry, in the name of Allah, most gracious, most merciful. Same sentiment, but yeah, every chapter starts that way. So because I'm jumping around when you're listening, it makes it a lot easier to, oh, we've started a new chapter, because I've said that. And I remind people about that at the beginning of every episode, just in case.
Let me see. Well, the opening, as it's labeled here, goes, in the name of God, the most gracious, the most merciful. And then what I'm going to assume they call the heifer,
Yeah, that's
chapter 2,
chapter
it
2.
says, in the name of God, the most gracious, the most merciful. So, yeah, it does repeat it. Let me see what.
Yep. Every damn verse. Or sorry, every chapter. See, I've gotten in the habit of referring them as surahs and ayats, so when I say it normal
Oh,
speak, it,
that's fine to me. It's like I sometimes joke is that one of your fortes, as I like to call it, is debating Islam. I've watched you in action in some of the groups that we are both in, and I just sit there. I'm like, but for me, where counter apologetics, especially concerning homosexuality in the Bible or not in the Bible, and you pick up the lingo, so to speak, a lot quicker than what I would, because it's not something I do on a quote daily basis. I mean, I know there's times where you'll be still debating at 10 in the morning, and I left you at 2, and you're still going with the same fucking person. And I
might have done that once or twice.
Yeah, you've kind of slowed down on that, but I find it, and I can do the same thing when debating homosexuality, and it's just like, I think it's important because for you and for me, from a co-host perspective and a friend perspective, I've actually learned a lot by watching your debates, for lack of a better word. And yes, I'm biased. I mean, I readily admit. I mean, we wouldn't be friends if we didn't think alike.
Well, true.
We'd have I think we figured it out last year. I think there's like one thing that we don't really agree on, but it's more a matter of perspective.
Yeah.
I mean, talk about an echo chamber, but and that's the thing. I mean, even though I have the want to delve into this more because of what you've shared in private or in the debates and now through your show, I just don't have the willingness to, and I think this will pique people's interest along the way.
I think it's information that a lot of people should have, and people might say, why the hell would you waste your time reading that bullshit? Because I think it's important that, because I am anti-theism, I'm not just an atheist, I am against religiosity. And so if I'm going to be against different faiths, I ought to have a fucking clue what it is that I'm against.
Right.
And so and a lot of times if I confront a Muslim about some of the ideologies, I get just dismissed as, well, you're a stupid white woman. What do you know?
Yeah, exactly.
So if I start throwing out Quran verses and references to Hadith and Tafsir, then they actually have to work to refute what I'm saying.
Yeah. Well, unless we run into that one guy we ran into that doesn't believe in the
Ahmadi. Yeah, there's
the Ahmadi.
Muslims that don't really follow the Hadith, which is kind of weird because that's where a lot of the detail comes from. For instance, the praying 5 times a day comes more so from the Hadith. The ritual washing that I actually go into quite a bit in episode 2, that comes from more so from the Hadith. And very important for the sects that believe adultery should be punished with stoning, that's not in the Quran, that's in the Hadith. Now, my goat ate my Quran page story becomes kind of important there, because there are many who claim the verse that says that adulterers should be stoned was in the Quran, but that's the verse the goat ate. And because the guy who was putting all the crime pieces together couldn't find, because remember, his criteria is 2 companions had to remember the verse and he has to find it written down somewhere. And so because it was no longer written down somewhere, it didn't go in the Quran because the goat ate it. But somebody decided that, I know, very convenient. There's a lot of convenient stuff that comes out in the Quran. Like I said, there are verses in the Quran that are super specific. Like, I think it was the first reading episode, so episode 3, it mentioned a specific guy and how Allah was going to basically make his life miserable, and his wife too, because he was an enemy of Islam. And I'm like, who the hell's that guy? So I Googled it, and it was Muhammad's uncle, who, I guess Muhammad, they had a warning system in, I guess at this point it would be in Mecca. So if they saw a band of invaders coming, they had a specific warning cry that was to be used to warn everybody that there was an invader. Well, Muhammad thought it would be really smart to get up on a hill and use this warning cry to warn people that they better follow Allah or else. And this is when Islam was a new thing. And his uncle got pissed off. That is basically like pulling the fire alarm to tell everybody about Jesus. Like that was the kind of equivalent that he was doing. And his uncle got pissed off and started throwing rocks at him and told him to shut the fuck up. And so because of that, Allah had to come down and specifically decree that uncle was an enemy of Islam and that Allah was going to fuck his shit up. Like, that's pretty damn specific there.
Well, I think it's interesting you mentioned it, because I know on Maddie's show you had mentioned about, I think it was Maddie's show, about how with multiple wives and how that became a thing.
Oh,
because,
yeah. Well,
Muhammad wanted it that way because he wanted it.
Well, Islam, now he started off, and I haven't got to the part in the Quran that says you can have 4 wives yet. But I don't know if polygamy was a thing culturally at that time or not, and he was just kind of going with the flow. I'm not sure. But Islam at that point had restricted everybody to 4 wives. And then he saw some hot babe that he wanted, which actually turned out to be his daughter-in-law, but that's a whole other angle. But he already had 4 wives, and he saw a 5th one he wanted. And oh, look, God had a revelation that, well, everybody else has to stick to 4 wives, but you're the prophet, so you can have as many as you want. And I think he ended up with a total of like 11 or 12 by the time he died. Now, a lot of the Muslims are going to tell you, oh, but they were almost all of his wives were older and they were widows, and he just married them to take care of them, and he certainly wasn't having sex with all the. Yeah, bullshit. Total bullshit. There's a story where he has, because again, you can have 4 wives if you're a normal Muslim. Plus, so you can have sex slaves. If you conquer somebody and you capture their women, you can have as many concubines as you want. That's fine. So Muhammad, on top of his like 11 or 12 wives, had a Coptic Christian concubine that had been captured at some point and given to him. And he really liked her, so he was spending too much time with her. The other wives got pissed off that he wasn't spending. And we are talking booty call here, people. We're not talking, oh, Muhammad, you didn't have dinner with me last night. No, we're talking sex here, people. They all got mad that he was going off to bang his concubine and not spend time with them. And they got pissed off, and to the point where he's like, okay, I'm not going to go. I won't see her anymore. And then God had a revelation that Muhammad had a right to go bang his concubine as much as he wanted. And if his wives didn't like it, Allah would replace them with wives that would listen.
Well, I find that argument that they use concerning the concubines and stuff really kind of dumb, for lack of a better word, because what religion has their women wrapped up like burlap sacks because we can't control our urges?
Yeah. But then I'm going to have concubines that I can go fuck whenever I want anyway.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, we're running up actually to 9 o'clock, and you were like, oh, I don't think we'll make it 2 hours. So before we run out of time, if
Yes.
you could pick 3 things that you want your listeners to learn or to gain from listening to your podcast, what would it be?
That Islam is just as ridiculous as all the other religions, especially the Abrahamics, because they're all from the same source. That you should have a basic knowledge of something before you're going to say that it's terrible and people shouldn't have anything to do with it. I don't advocate banning religion, because as soon as you make something um, illegal or taboo, it makes people want to do it more. So I'm not a fan of that, but I think we should discourage people in healthy ways, like laughing at it and calling it for the ridiculousness that it is. But I think in order to do that effectively, it really, really helps that you have at least a very basic understanding of what it is. So when a Muslim says, "Oh, you're just a stupid white woman, you don't know anything about Islam," I can be like, "Oh, I don't know. Did you know that the Quran says that?" And when I love to pull it is Ezekiel 23:20 on Christians, right? So yeah, I think that's important. And um, I think the other thing that is important is that you shouldn't allow anyone else to dismiss how you view something. So that whole you're just interpreting it wrong, and you got that whole idea that you've got to believe it before you can understand it is total bullshit too. That you can read something like the Quran and rely on your understanding, because if God is omnipotent and omniscient, you shouldn't need anything else but your understanding.
Mm-hmm.
I guess that
Well,
would.
and that goes back to the whole shtick I got into with that dude about, well, some individuals believe that Christianity is a, quote, personal relationship with God. Well, how do you define that? You're telling me that I mean, and I went through this in college, and it was like, basically, I was undiagnosed with my bipolar, and people were, well, you just don't pray right, or you're just not the right type of Christian. And it's like, well, this is my understanding of it. And, I could have prayed till I was blue in the face.
You do it too with like we were talking about the Ahmadi. If you are a Pakistani citizen, so Pakistan, um, I'm not sure if it's Shia or Sunni. I know Ali is Shia, but I'm not sure that that's just because he's Pakistani or not. But if you are a citizen of Pakistan and you want a Pakistani passport, you actually have to sign a paper that says you disavow the Ahmadi as being Muslims, that
Yeah.
you believe that Ahmadi are not Muslims.
Hmm.
Like, the whole fucking country has to sign that paper if you want a passport. How ridiculous is that?
Well, and that's the whole no true Scotsman's fallacy. Oh,
Absolutely.
they're just not, I hear constantly in oh, they're just not the right type of Christian. It's like, who the fuck are you to judge? Where does it say you're allowed to judge other people like that? If they profess, a belief in basic Christian tenets, I'm not going to nitpick here, which basically come down to divinity of Christ and he died and all that other bullshit. I mean, so who are you to judge? It's like you said with the Ahmadi, it's just like, who are you to judge? You know, or even what's going on about in Rohingya.
Yes.
I mean, are they a Mahdi? I might be confused.
No, Rohingya is another sect again.
Yeah, I mean, I had one person I have on my so-called quote. You know, I basically like Dub. I am an anti-theist. I'm a little bit stronger than Dub is, but I realize in my utopian world that religion cannot be eliminated for basically the same reasons, and we all know how well that works, China. But I believe religion, and I have this right on my page. Religious mythos must die. And I got into discussion about a month or so ago, and someone goes, "Well, you're awfully violent." I'm like, "You should really watch what you say on your profile." I'm like, "What do I say?" I'm like, "You're saying that religion must die." I said, "Yeah, religion, mythos, the beliefs, the ideology."
There's nothing violent about that. I want religion to die too.
And I said, "Where's the violence?" "Well, you're advocating for killing people." I said, "No, I'm not."
No, not at all.
It's like, and that's the thing. I mean, it's just like I said. And who are you to judge me?
Right.
I said that all you know, and I've noticed this in a couple of the groups that I'm in. Is that's all they're doing. They're but yet more politics. They think more is the greatest thing since sliced bread.
Oh, don't get me started on that asshole.
I mean, you're gonna sit here and judge other Christians that they're not the right kind of Christians, but because Roy Moore says he's a Christian and a child fucker,
Yep.
you're gonna accept him. Okay, yeah, I ended that conversation. I just like laughed. I was like, I can't deal with this. I went into one of
asshole, but
yeah, and that's the thing, and like I have been trying and this goes to a point you made about understanding your adversary.
yes.
One of the a couple different posts have popped through my feed about trying to understand your adversary. You know, understand why they think the way they do. Now, with anti-vaxxers, it's 99 of 100 times it's fear-based. I mean, they fear vaccines, so if you give them the proper information, they may change their mind, or at least, you know. But I've found especially with creationists, and it's lately been something I've been following, that it's just utter stupidity. I mean, no matter how much I sit there and try to understand, like I had asked a question, this was in the Hogan group, I said, well, what do you think creationism is? I said, or evolution. And he sits there and quotes me Kevin Hovind. I'm like, no, I don't want Hovind's definition. I want yours. Well, this is a Hovind group. I said, we don't worship Kent Hovind. I said, what do you believe? And it's like, they can't do it. And I said, but yet you're going to judge evolution based on Hovind's flawed. And it's been proven hundreds and thousands of times that it's flawed definition of evolution. I said, you have no personal understanding. And I think shows like your podcast will help hopefully light that fire under people's asses to
so.
I mean, I'm probably one of the worst ones with learning other religions because, you know, and then spouting off before I know any better and getting myself into trouble. But there's just so many religions and not enough time.
Yeah.
It's like,
but
I mean, even.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. Oh, I was just gonna say, too many religions, not enough time, and then you got cults.
Yeah. Yeesh. Okay. But any more questions? I think I'm about ready to wrap stuff up.
No, that's pretty much it. I just, I thought it important, and why I sprung this on you is for people to realize, you know, it's a resource, but it's also, it's you. So if you sit through our 2 hours,
Yeah.
there's something else you can listen to. But and as I said, yes, I am biased, but I do think you're headed down the right track, and I look forward to listening to the rest of it, because
Yeah.
the rate I'm going, that's the only way I'm going to get through the Quran right now.
Well, and that's just it. Like I was really bummed when the original show um was canned, and because I wanted the information. I wanted to quote read the Quran without reading the damn thing. And so I figured, well, I can't be the only one that wants to do that. So I guess if no one else is forthcoming, I'll bite the bullet and do it myself.
Well, yeah, I kind of wondered, like, why, what your motivation, why, I know what your motivation, but, like, why the fuck would you do this to yourself, kind of like, why the fuck am I reading the Bible for the 800th time, but
Yep.
just sometimes you just gotta do what you gotta do, because it's,
Yep.
sitting and listening. For me, it's, I listen to, Steve Anderson and Kent Hovind, and it's like, oh, why am I doing this? Because their bullshit needs to be countered.
Yep.
You know?
Absolutely. And like I say, the more people that I can help prevent get dismissed by Muslims for being non-Muslim, a Westerner, white person, whatever, the better. If even if I don't expect people to become as ingrained in it as I am, but if they can at least say, "Hey, wait a minute, that wasn't in the Quran when I read it," like the whole hijab thing that I learned from an ex-Muslim that that's not in the Quran in the way that people seem to think it is. There's no verse in the Quran that says thou shalt dress thy wife in a garbage bag. It's not in there. It's not. So, I want people to understand what it, I mean, there's enough bad shit in there. And of course, like I said, the other whole bit about context, because a lot of times when you look at there's another verse, the actual number escapes me, but it's, if you kill one person, it's the same as if you had killed the whole world. And Muslims like to trot that out to say, see, we can't be terrorists because Allah forbids us from killing anyone. Well, no, the context of that verse is that that was a directive given to Jews and no one else. And the very next verse, Allah's telling, okay, and you Muslims, if anybody fights you, then you kill you chop off all their fingers and everything, like all kinds of heinous things. And then they'll say, well, but it says if they fight you. I'm like, I'm going around saying that Muhammad was a charlatan and that the Quran's full of shit. Does that sound like I'm fighting you? I thought so. I'm keeping my goddamn fingers. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, and it's like you said. I mean, context is important, and that's one of my major arguments, especially concerning homosexuality, and why I say homosexuality is not in the Bible. Because if you look at the entire context, it's not. I am not a Gali priest. I am not a Levite priest. I am not a child of Israel. Or, one of my favorites recently is, someone, well, I'm a follower of Christ. Oh, you're Jewish?
Yeah.
No, Christ is Christian. I'm like,
one of those,
and I'll say, well,
like, I'm not religious. I just follow Jesus.
Yeah, and it's like, well, Christ was a Jew, and they're like, no, he wasn't. I'm like, please show me the Bible verse where Christ denounces his Judaic roots. Please. I'd like to know which verse is it. Because I can tell you, without a doubt, it ain't in the fucking Bible.
Yep.
And don't be quoting me Paul. It's out there either, because Paul is antithetical to Christ.
Yep.
It's like, and it's yeah. So I mean, the tactics we use in counter apologetics for Christianity are pretty damn close to what we can use in Islam. And fighting Islam, well, fighting, I shouldn't really use that word, but combating Islam, they're very similar. Problem being is we have to familiarize ourselves with what's in the Quran.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So, like, through this whole spiel, we never really said, where the fuck is your show? And what's the name of it?
We usually do that at the beginning anyway. It's called Full Quranic, and you can find it at www.fullquranic.com. And we also have a Facebook page, and I've already put the links in the show notes, so that'll be up on the Spreaker YouTube. You can find it there. And the nice thing is it's on a different platform than Beyond the Trailer Park. I might actually consider switching, except that the other platform doesn't do live audio streaming like we're doing on Spreaker right now. So that's kind of a bummer, but you can actually listen or download the show directly from fullquranic.com, which is really cool. I am also, though, on Google Play. It was approved, and I've been approved on Stitcher. I'm still waiting for iTunes, but apparently they shut down for like 2 or 3 weeks in December for holidays. So I'm hoping that'll get put through in the next week or so, because it was submitted. So there's that. So hopefully it'll be on iTunes very shortly, but it is on Stitcher, Google Play, and available at www.fullquranic.com. So there we go. And of course, I'm just going to go say my spiel, and you can be last this time. Yeah, we are, of course, here Mondays at 7:30 p.m. Eastern, beyondthetrailerpark.com. Oh, and Full Chronic does have a Twitter at Full Chronic. I don't have any followers yet, so if you could follow me, that would be cool. And there is a Patreon for both shows. So Patreon.com/Full Chronic. I don't have any patrons yet either, but take a listen to the show first, make sure you like it. But that does go towards hosting fees and things like that, as does the money that we get from patrons Beyond the Trailer Park. We use that money to pay for the Spreaker hosting. I did upgrade to monthly patronage from the per episode. It's a little easier on the patrons and on us, actually. And Patreon did get smart and decided not to roll out the surcharges to patrons that they were planning to do. So this is good. They listened to the feedback where everybody said, no, we don't want that. And they didn't do it. So that's a bonus for them, at least. Yeah, I think I've covered just about everything there. I think
you forgot about Holy Crap.
Oh yeah, Holy Crap, the vlogcast, where I appear Sunday mornings at 12:05 a.m. Holycrapthevlogcast.com, or on the YouTube channel, which is also Holy Crap, the vlogcast, run by Shujin Tribble, and I am one of the motley crew of panelists, and we talk about anything and everything that is secular. So there's that also. Gosh, I'm not used to having 3 shows for a while.
But before I go into my spiel, which is pretty much the same as it's always been, the past few weeks, Beyond the Trailer Park, our group page, we have surpassed the 210 members, which is pretty awesome in my opinion for our little humble show here that we started on a whim, 3.5 years ago now. I've been really crappy in my duties. I try to greet everybody as they join the group, but I've not been very good at that lately. So I want to welcome our new fans. And for those of you that may have joined Beyond the Trailer Park specifically because of full Quranic, I welcome you. And we take feedback. So if there and correction. So if we've said anything that's an error or in error to what you believe, let us know so we can bullshit about it and see where we go. And we also do have a closed group page that we try to vet our members for the simple reason, basically like Vegas, what's said on that page better damn well stay on that page, because I will delete your ass. And I'm pretty sure Deb and Dave and our other admins are on the same page here, that we will delete your ass faster than fast. And I will stalk you, and you will become a blog post. I can guarantee it. But yeah, pretty much it's a safe space for people that were original fans of Atheists on Air with Cash and Professor Stephen. We took over, we merged that page with ours with Beyond the Trailer Park, but it's a safe place if you want to vent, if you want to say something you can't say publicly on your page, and I do occasionally do that because there's some things I would prefer not to have a bullet put in my head because I live around a bunch of rednecks. So, we're not super active in either group. Deb's more of a social butterfly than I, and my blog has been taking up a lot of time. So if you got questions, ask. We try to get back to you within 24 hours. I check it every day. So if you want, Facebook groups, it's AOA Beyond the Trailer Park is for the closed group. And yes, there are 3 questions you have to answer unless we actually know you personally. But check it out. I'd love to see our groups grow. I think it would be pretty cool. But to find me, easiest way, Twitter, Dune9998. That connects to my blog, Havoc and Chaos, which primarily I'm leaning towards highlighting the abuses of the church, whether it be diddling a child or sex crimes, fraud, psychic scams. No, that's not the church, but I'm kind of getting away from blogging per se, but there's still some topics, and I want to hopefully, if things go my way, concentrate more on video stuff, but I just haven't had the gumption to write anything. But you can find my blog, Havoc and Chaos, that connects to Facebook, and that also connects to YouTube, which is just under my name, Beth Hambridge.
All right. Hey. Well, folks, I think that about does it for this episode. So we will see you next week. And you may have noticed I have shit working again. Yay! Thank you to Jim Dobler, who sat in a hangout with me this afternoon while I tested everything and made sure it worked. I totally appreciate it, man. But yes, it does look like things are working again. So I will be able to leave you with the human creed for all mankind, and we will see you all next week.
I know the truth and power of reason and of rational thinking, and I will use them to my advantage. I know the truth and power of educating myself and of expanding my intellectual boundaries, and I will educate myself. I know the truth and power of vanquishing ignorance, and I will do so whenever the opportunity presents itself. I know the truth and power of morality without supervision, and of true and accurate righteousness. I know the truth and power of obliterating tyranny, be it intellectual, emotional, or philosophical, and will work toward that goal whenever and however possible. I know the truth and power of human ingenuity. I know the truth and power of human compassion, and I will be mindful of the welfare of others. I know the truth and power of equality and fairness for all living things. I know the truth and power of the importance of our families, our friends, and our fellow men and women. I know the truth and power of human stewardship of our lands, our waters, and our skies, and I will try to act to preserve our environment. I know the truth and power of the sciences of mathematics, of physics, and of chemistry, and of the important role of these disciplines in understanding the workings of this cosmos. I know the truth and power of the rejection of all notions or beliefs that reside in the supernatural or the superstitious, and of those notions or beliefs that we are not supposed to be able to explain. And I know that these rejections are necessary for humankind's survival. I am a human being with a free mind, liberated from irrational influence and from unreasonable dogma.